Hi, this is Mr. West, and today we're doing a Khan Academy tutorial on divide whole numbers by decimals. We're going to go ahead and get started. There's a couple things we need to know before we take on this first problem, which is 216 divided by 0.6. You're going to see a lot of stuff on the screen, but I first want to draw your attention to the dividend and divisor in yellow and green at the top. So here we see that the first number that is being divided is called the dividend, and the number we're dividing by is called the divisor. So one thing about dividing by decimals is we have to have this divisor be a whole number. So we have to change our problem. Okay, so I'm going to change it here in just a moment. We see 216 divided by 0.6 in black. But before we get to that, I want us to understand what happens when we divide by decimals. So if I have 216 divided by 60, there's only so many times a 60 can fit into that 216. There's only so many of those groups. It's not very many. It's a little over 3. So we'll call that really small. Now, if I divide by 6, well, I can fit quite a few 6s in there, so we'll call that small. And if I divide by 1, well, that's no change. It's going to be bigger than these other two right here, and it's going to be 216. Now, what happens if I divide by a number smaller than 1? So you see the pattern here, right? The larger the number we're dividing by, the smaller it gets. But the smaller that number gets, it gets less small. What happens if we have it less than 1 then? Well, we're going to get a big number. It's actually going to increase. It's going to be over 216. And if we divide it by 0.06, this just means how many of these smaller groups of this small decimal, 0.06, can I fit into 216? Well, a lot. Okay, so this is going to be very big. And that's how dividing by decimals works. The smaller the decimal, the larger the number will become. So let's go back to our problem up here. If we wanted to change 0.6 to become a whole number, well, that means we need to move that decimal over. Okay, so if we move that decimal over, this no longer becomes 0.6, but it becomes, we'll move it up here, it becomes 6.0, which we can just write as 6. So we have our mission accomplished, but we can't just make it 216 divided by 6. That changes the problem. Instead, we also have to move this decimal, that's an implied decimal right there, over 1. If we do that, we have to fill in that space with a 0. Essentially what we're doing here is because that is a tenth, we need to multiply both these numbers to keep it balanced by 10. So multiply 216 by 10 and 0.6 by 10. And the result is I have a number like this, 2,160 divided by 6. That is my new problem. I'm going to show you two different ways to divide. I have found that a lot of students prefer this box method, but I'm going to show you the traditional method also. So using the traditional method, you'd set it up like this. You'd ask yourself, does 6 go into 2? It doesn't. So now I'm going to see, does 6 go into, let me change my colors here. Does 6 go into 21? It does. It goes in 3 times, and that's 18. So I'm going to subtract 21 minus 18, and I get 3. Now I'm going to drop down this next number. Okay, so I handled 21. I'm going to handle that 6 by dropping it down next to it, and it becomes 36. So now I say to myself, how many times does 6 go into 36? Now when I'm saying how many times does it go in, I may have glossed over this, but I'm seeing how many groups of 6 I can fit in. So here I said 18 because if I went to 4 groups, that's 24, and that's too big for the 21, right? Now I'm at 36, and 36 I can get to exactly with 6 groups of 6. Okay, so I just wanted to reference that real quick. I'm actually going to have to erase this because I need that space. But that's why your multiplication chart or understanding your multiplication facts is so important. So subtract 36 here, and I get 0. Okay, so I've handled 2, 1, 6. I have to handle this last 0 by dropping it down. If I drop down a 0 next to 0, it doesn't change the value. 6 goes into 0 times. That's as close as I can get, and I get 0 as a remainder. With decimal division, you cannot have a remainder. So if that happens, if I had a remainder here, I would put a decimal and I would drop down to 0 and just keep going until I have no remainder. But for now, we just have 360 as our answer. Let me quickly show you what that looks in box division. That's what I've been showing my classes. So I would put this on the inside, very much like I put that on the inside in that standard algorithm. And you're going to see that this is a very similar process. So I have 6 goes into 2 0 times. So I'm going to do this slightly different, and that's 0, right? 6 times 0 gives me that 0 in red. My remainder is 2, and I'm going to bring this over, what I like to say, to the neighbor's house. I have leftovers. I'm going to bring them to the neighbor's house. And now my new number is 21. You can see that's the same thing I got right here, that 21, on the top right of your screen. So now I have 21. I know that goes in 3 times, and that is 18. I subtract, and I get 3, just like I got 3 right there on the top right of your screen. I bring that up. I get 36. That goes in 6 times, and that's 36. You can see that I'm following along right here with all these numbers. It's just a different format. It's the same process, though. And 6 goes into 0 0 times, and I have no remainder. For the box method, this last box right here, whoops, I want to make that green. That box is your remainder. So if it's 0, you're good to go. We don't have to do anything else. So our answer is 360. Long story short, I know that was a long first problem, whoops, but I'm going to make it go quicker from here. Very satisfying sound. Okay, so now we have 65 divided by 13. So let's formalize this process. So step 1, we want to change divisor to whole number. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move the decimal. Step 2, move decimal for divisor and dividend. Okay, so that's a very important step. So I have to move it twice for both. This becomes 6500, so then that's step 3 is fill in zeros if necessary, which I needed it for this problem. A problem where you don't need it, for example, so if this was 6.51 divided by 0.13, I'd move it over twice. It would become 651 divided by 13. I wouldn't need any zeros there because I moved the decimal over twice, and I didn't have any gaps, so to speak. And then step 4 is just divide. We'll call that long divide. Now, you can have a decimal in this dividend. So if I had, for example, we'll call it 65.1 divided by 13. That's totally fine. You just need to make sure at the end that your answer has one number after the decimal. You're just gonna move it up in your setup. And I don't think we're gonna get into any for this problem, but you can check out some other videos that I talk about that. You just bring that decimal up in your long division, and that settles it. So it's just like normal. You pretend that's 651. We just bring that decimal up. Doesn't matter that there's a decimal there. It only matters if there's a decimal there. Okay, so I'm going to show the box method for this one again. Most of my students prefer it, so that's what we're getting. I'm going to do this quickly. I don't want this video to run over too long. So 6500 divided by 13. So this is double-digit division. Same process, but we just have a little bit tougher because we have 13 instead of like a single-digit number. 13 does not go into 6, so I'm going to end up going like this. And what ends up happening is you just look at the next, you're going to look at that as 65 essentially. 13 goes into 65 5 times, and that's 65. 13 times 5 is 65. And I get 0. So from here on out, I'm just going to get zeros because you can look ahead and see that I have nothing left. So I'm going to get 500 for my answer. Another way to think of this is I know 65 divided by 13 is 5, so that I just add the 2 zeros for those 2 zeros, and I'm done. So 500 is our answer, 500. Check it and move on to the next question. Okay, here we go. I have to move the decimal over 1 time, step 1. My new problem is 600 divided by 2. From here, you don't even need long division, really. So I know 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I just have 2 zeros, so I'm going to add 2 zeros on right there. So 300 is my answer. That's a way that you can avoid long division, is just using normal division if you know the answers in front of the 0. And this is going to be another one. So I'm going to move this over 2 times. I would be careful here. 2 times there, so we have 770 plus 2 zeros, 1, 2. divided by 77. Definitely write it out. I have students that try to do this in their head and they make just little easy mistakes, so try not to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pretend this is 77 divided by 77. And I know that answer equals 1, but then I just need to include those 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. And 1,000 is my answer. Oops. And I'm all set. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a comment if you have any questions over anything I've covered. And I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Wes Explains Best.